My name is Raphael Cassia. I'm the chair of the Audio Engineering Society South German Section, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this event. We see some new faces in the audience. This event is available to everyone. But if you're in South Germany and want to be part of the section, then that's all possible. If you're an AES member, then you can notify in your profile that you're then, this is one of your sections, and then that'll happen. And we also have a mailing list and a LinkedIn group. So you can get a hold of me via my name. You can just search me on LinkedIn. And there's some QR codes floating around in the presentation previously. We can put them up at the end as well, or just get in touch with us on the chat if you want, if you need to know where that is. But it's actually, we actually have a website and a blog and a mailing list on our section within the AES website. So if you go to the AES website and search for the South German section, or actually just Google AES South German section, I think that works as well, then you come to our page, and then you should be able to get in touch with us like that. So I won't talk too much about the sort of things we've got planned, especially with the Research Colloquium, because Elena will cover that. So without further ado, I'll invite Elena Shabalina, who is in charge of organizing the colloquia, to say a few words and introduce our esteemed speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Raphael, and thank you very much, everybody, for coming. I'm really glad to see so many of you here. I'm Elena Shabalina from DNB Audiotechnik. I do applied research, and for the AES South German section, I organized a series of Research Colloquium. The idea is to create a platform for audio professionals and researchers out of our area and basically everywhere to get to know each other, to get to know each other's work and research, and interact, maybe form collaborations. We aim to hold a colloquium every month, sometimes more often than every month. Usually it will be the third Tuesday of each month. And some of them will be a single presenter talking about their work, or sometimes there will be a roundtable discussion with people from a research institution in the industry together, talking about the topic from their different perspectives. And we want to make it as friendly as possible, less formal than a regular conference, so that if you listen to a presentation that is not in your primary field, you feel comfortable enough asking questions. We specifically want to encourage that people can learn about other fields where they are not primary in, and just be comfortable talking about this and exchange ideas. So if you have any questions later, there will be breaks in the presentation to ask questions, or you can message one of us with your question and then we will ask it for you if you want to remain anonymous. Okay, so our very first colloquium today is done by Nadja Schinkel-Bielefeld. It is about ecological momentary assessment, evaluation hearing aids in real life. I will give you Nadja's biography. She studied physics at the universities of Bremen in Germany and Durham, is it correct, in the UK, graduating from the latter with a Master of Science in Elementary Particle Theory. She obtained a doctorate from Bremen University for research on probabilistic models of human contour integration, conducted at the Institute of Theoretical Neurophysics. She went on to do 2 postdocs in the United States. The first one was in the Department of Brain and Cognitive Sciences at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where she worked on models for human perceptual organization and its implications for computer-human interactions. The second one was in the Neurotheory Lab at the University of Maryland, College Park, where she worked on nonlinear models of single neuron computation in the auditory system. After returning to Germany, she worked at the Fraunhofer Institute of Integrated Circuits, conducting research on listening test methodology for the subjective evaluation of speech and audio-coded material. In 2017, she joined Sivantos GmbH, where she focuses on big data analysis and the evaluation of hearing aids in everyday life using ecological momentary assessment. So this is a very impressive biography, and I look forward to Nadja's presentation. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Elena, for this really nice introduction. I'm wondering how many of you have performed carefully designed experiments in the laboratory and wondered afterwards, how relevant is this actually in real life? And is there a better method to evaluate your products in real life? But before I come to that, I would like to briefly introduce the company I work for. WS Audiology was formed in 2019 by the merger of Sivantos GmbH and Videx, but we're looking back at an experience of more than 140 years of building hearing aids and helping people with hearing loss, going back to Werner von Siemens, who in 1878 designed the first Siemens hearing aid and founded Siemens Audiologische Technik. And in 2016, Siemens Audiology Solutions changed names to Sivantos and became independent. And then 2 years ago, we joined with Videx, a family-owned hearing aid company, which was built in the 1950s. Today, over 500 million of people suffer from some kind of hearing loss, and only 15% of those are actually wearing hearing aids. So it's the purpose of our company to unlock human potential by making wonderful sound part of everybody's life. I'm working in audiology. Audiology consists of 3 groups. We have scientific audiology, where we develop new ways of fitting hearing aids and new ways of evaluating our hearing aids. We plan, conduct, and publish audiological research, and we also make sure that there is transfer into the platform development. We have the sound and fitting team, which is working on audiological platform development and product sound design. So their main topic is the sound design and feature optimization, and they also develop proprietary fitting formulas. And the third team is applied audiological research. They do a lot of audiological verification and validation, so lots of subject trials and studies, including usability on comfort checks. Here is a picture of the science team back when all 3 sites were visiting in Erlangen. So the science team is distributed over Erlangen, over Lynge in Denmark, where the Videx headquarter is, and Stockholm in Sweden. And we work a lot with external partners. Since we have merged, we have also more resources to do more research in-house, but we still like to work with external partners, and you're seeing some of the partners we're working with here. So what topics do we work on? One is successful fitting. So hearing aids are not one size fits all. They need to be adjusted to the individual hearing loss of a person. And the question is, what is successful fitting? Is it successful if the person is satisfied? Is it successful if the person understands more than before? Or maybe if he participates more in social life than before? A very important situation for hearing aid wearers is group conversations, because you usually have a lot of problems when you try to understand a speaker and there's lots of noise around. So we're looking into that, how we can improve our hearing instruments for group conversations, and also what measures there are for the success in group conversations. We would like our hearing aids to perform well in real life. So we're looking into real life insights. We have lots of consumer apps. So of course, we're also looking into the data of our consumer apps and try to derive insights from this. And we also perform studies where we send people home with the hearing aids, and the method we use there is often ecological momentary assessment, where you will learn more about later. So this method development and developing ecological momentary assessment into a reliable tool is also one of the topics we work on. Then we look onto the self-controlled hearing journey. So a hearing journey does not start with buying a hearing aid. It starts up often years earlier when you first realize that you have some kind of hearing loss. And then often it takes years before the person goes to an acoustician and actually decides to do something against it. And it goes on when you buy the hearing aid, you still have to get used to it and so on. So we're looking at the whole journey. And we're also trying to give the hearing aid wearer some control. Maybe you don't want to go to the acoustician whenever you want to change something in your hearing aid. Maybe you want to have more control. And having more control to change things yourself maybe also gives you a feeling of empowerment. So we're looking into how can we give people the feeling of being in control. And this has all been about hearing, and hearing aids do have a microphone, but they could have many more sensors than just the microphone. You could, for example, imagine using an EEG or an MEG in order to find out what the person would like to attend to. And it would be really cool if we were able to find out what the person would like to listen to and steer the hearing instruments accordingly. A sensor we already have in our hearing aids is a motion sensor. We use that to steer the hearing aids because if you're moving, usually you want to orient yourself, and then you have different needs than when you're standing still and you're in a conversation, for example. But you can also use a motion sensor for gait analysis, meaning you analyze the way people move when people walk to diagnose some illnesses. And given that many of our hearing aid wearers are elderly people, that's relevant for them as well. Okay, now coming to ecological momentary assessment. What is it and why are we interested in this? As I said, we would like to analyze hearing problems of hearing impaired individuals in everyday life. This could be simply looking at what problems they face, or it could be evaluating how our technology in real life. And the question is, how can we do that? One possibility is to do experiment in the lab, and they are great because they are controlled, they are reproducible, and so you can find very fine differences between two technologies, and it's very accurately. So we have a wave field synthesis chamber. We can just play some restaurant noise, and then surely that's the same as being in the restaurant with your friends, right? Well, actually, I don't think so either. The other possibility would be home trials. So we send home people with hearing instruments, they wear them for a couple of weeks, then they come back and fill out a questionnaire. This spans the whole time and the whole life, but the question is, can they remember the situations accurately? Maybe they only report on the most recent situations and forget on some situations earlier on. And even if they can remember everything accurately, the question is, how do they combine different situations? Maybe they only report on the difficult situations and not on the situations where they were doing great with their hearing instruments. And last but not least, even if they report accurately, we don't know the acoustic parameters of the situations they report on. You can ask, for example, how much did you understand in a group conversation? How was the sound quality when listening music? But you still would not know the level of the music, the SNR, and what environment were they in, and so on. And you also would not know what the hearing instrument was doing, which algorithms would be active. So that's also not the ideal possibility. Another possibility would be ecological momentary assessment. So this method consists of repeated surveys which are filled out in the moment. So it's momentary, you have very little memory bias if you report on the current situation. It's filled out in the environment people usually live on while they live their life. So it should be representative for real life. And nowadays you have smartphones which allow to also collect objective data. So the advantage is it's representative for real life because you ask while life is lived, very little memory bias, and it's context sensitive because we are not only asking how are you doing with your hearing aids, but we are also asking what situation are you in, whom are you listening to, what's in the background, and so on. So we have lots of information about the particular situation and can analyze different situations individually. And we can combine all of this with acoustic recordings with acoustic parameters from the hearing instrument, so we know more about the situation and what's going on inside the hearing instrument. Here's the outline of my talk. I will start with an overview of EMA in hearing research and clinical practice. Then I will talk about a study we did in order to compare hearing aids with EMA. We also looked at which situations might be missing in EMA. You could imagine that in social situations, maybe people are not too keen to fill out a questionnaire. So it could be that we are systematically missing some situations. Then another study where we analyzed hearing program usage. And in the end, I would like to introduce a way of doing contactless EMA studies in times of Corona. So let's start with the overview of EMA in hearing research. EMA actually goes back to the early 80s, where it was used in social and behavioral sciences. But then it took nearly 2 decades before it actually was used in audiology. One of the first studies was still done with pen and paper and was looking at microphone preferences in hearing aids. So you could have an omnidirectional microphone, or you could focus on a certain direction. But after that, nearly another decade went by before there were some more studies, and they were only looking at construct validity. So not really answering any questions about the hearing aid, but primarily looking at the method, making sure it's really measuring what you wanted to measure. And another study looking at the technology, because we want to have objective data without violating privacy. So the question is, which parameter can you record if you cannot record what has been spoken? And only in very recent years, people actually started to use EMA to compare different hearing aids or different hearing aid settings, and also looked at the benefit of hearing aids compared to unaided listening. You cannot only use EMA to evaluate technologies, but also to simply look at the auditory reality of people. So this is what our colleagues in Stockholm did. They analyzed the auditory reality in order to find out which situations would be the most relevant so that we can use them for laboratory experiments. And all these studies usually use a very small sample of hearing aid wearers, but in theory, you could also use EMA as a freely downloadable app, and this is what Track Your Tinnitus does. So this is a self-help tool, and in comparison to all the previous studies, which are very well controlled, everyone can download it. It can use it to track their tinnitus, providing large-scale data for medical research, but of course, it's less controlled then. And this is a lot of research which is done with EMA, but you could also imagine that EMA has a lot of potential for the patient communication. When the patient comes to the acoustician and reports some problems, maybe the patient does not know the right words, maybe he forgot some situations, and if you give them an EMA app, in the questions there is already the right wording. It also points them to all the factors he or she should pay attention to. They quickly learn the questionnaire by heart and can mentally answer the questions in the situation and then answer the questions later. And you also have the objective data, so the acoustician could know which levels and SNR the person was in, whether the own voice was present, and also know about the current processing inside the hearing aid. So maybe whenever the noise canceller is active, there are some complaints, and then this is also much easier than to infer this from the report of the subjects. Okay, are there already any questions now? Otherwise, I would go on to the study comparing hearing aids using EMA.
I have one, if no one else does. You mentioned at the beginning that only about 50% of people with hearing loss actually have hearing aids.
Yes,
Do you know
usually.
Why is that exactly? Is there, I don't know, an emotional problem that people don't want to accept it, or they just never found out?
Well, I guess it takes some time until you accept that you actually need hearing aids. Often they are very expensive and there might be some stigma. Many people think of huge old hearing aids and which signal to other people that you are old or disabled. Nowadays, you actually have hearing aids which are barely visible, or you have cool form factors trying to mimic the cool technology the young people are using. So this is one reason. Another reason might be that the elderly people have a lot of different health issues, and maybe dealing with your hearing is not as important than dealing with your teeth or your eyes or whatever else. So a couple of different reasons.
Thanks.
And I just wanted to add, there's no Q&A feature here, I've just realized. Not that I can see anyway, or is there another one?
No, that needs that moderator.
So yeah, so just if you have a question and you don't want to ask it yourself, then just send a message to either me or Elena, and we will pass that one on during the next Q&A block. Thank you.
So the first big EMA study we actually did in our laboratory was on directional microphones. So hearing impaired suffer from a higher hearing threshold, but that's not the only thing. They also have reduced frequency resolution, and that makes it very hard to understand a single speaker in a noisy environment like a cocktail party, for example. In engineering, cocktail party problem often refers to the fact that humans are really great at focusing on one speaker in a room full of people talking. But for hearing impaired, that's not so easy. And what we are doing to helping them there is that we try to amplify the sound from the front while we are attenuating the sound from all other directions. And hearing aids automatically adjust depending on the direction where the sound is coming from and depending on the level of the background noise. So you may have this directional microphone or not, and it might be broader or narrower. And the question at WS Audiology was, do we need a stronger directionality? Some people said, yes, it's the only thing which helps people in noisy environments. And the other camp was basically saying, no, people need a stable impression and they want to be aware of their surrounding. We need less directionality. So we designed an EMA study to answer this question. Here is the study design. It was a 3-week study. We had 3 different hearing programs with varying directionality. Our universal program, which is part of our product, one more stable program with less narrow focus, and one program with a stronger narrow focus, which would come on at lower levels already. And then we had an automatic program change overnight. Why do we do this? We started out with having 1 week one program and 1 week the other program, but we realized that people would always like the last program best because there's some acclimatization, meaning they get used to the hearing instrument. And by changing the program every night, every temporal effects, may it be getting used to the hearing aid, may it be getting used to the EMA app or some fatigue effects, they should affect each program equally. We have 8 random triggers per day, and because this directionality feature is particularly important in loud environments, we have up to 4 additional triggers in loud environments. And they also had the possibility to trigger questionnaires themselves. And in addition, we collected the level continuously and the classification of the acoustic situation. So it could be speech in quiet, speech in noise, quiet, noise, music, or car. We had 20 experienced hearing aid wearers who all said they are comfortable with using smartphones, and they had an intermediate hearing loss. And in the beginning, we thought we just have this random trigger. So we average over all situations. We look what ratings does the one program get, what ratings does the other program get, and then we have our answer. Unfortunately, it's not so easy because people have different needs in different situations. And if you average over everything, we did not find any differences, neither in satisfaction nor in speech understanding or listening effort or sound quality or whatever we were asking. However, if you look only at louder situations with levels above 65 dB, and you're not only looking at the satisfaction, but also differentiate For the situation, we were asking whom or what are you listening to? And you can see that in group conversations, people prefer to have less directionality, while in conversations with one person, there is a trend for more directionality. So in different situations, there are opposing needs, and that's the reason why you need to specify on certain situations and cannot average over all situations people encounter. What we also saw was that there were a lot of very positive ratings. I mean, we know that there are problems with hearing aids, and our subjects often report that hearing aids help, but it's not comparable with being normal hearing. But here you see mostly they were very satisfied, and we even invented an absolutely delighted to get away from the ceiling effect. Sometimes we are criticized that the scale is not symmetric anymore, but given that there are so few ratings for very dissatisfied, I didn't see a point in inventing something like absolutely disgusted or whatever would be the opposite of absolutely delighted. And what you also see, if there are some dissatisfied ratings, then there are more for the user-initiated than for the random trigger or the loud environment trigger. And what could be a reason for this? I mean, there are many possible reasons for the skewed distribution. It could be that subjects just like to give socially desirable answers and tell us our hearing instruments are great. It could be that when they are having trouble hearing, then they don't want to fill out a questionnaire on top of this because the cognitive load is already high. But I believe one important reason for this is that if you don't understand well and you're dissatisfied with the situation, you don't stay in this situation. Imagine you cannot understand me properly, then you would not just sit in this presentation for 1.5 hours, but you would tell me to change my microphone to speak up or something like that. And if nothing of this would help, you would probably leave the presentation. So we modify our environment, and if we can't modify it, we do not just stay there and suffer through it. And if this is the case, this could lead to an overestimation of the hearing aid performance because we don't get the ratings for the difficult situations. And that would also mean that the differences between two technologies might be underestimated because especially in the difficult situations, you would see the differences between two technologies. What you see here is the wearing time in different environments in different levels here. And you can see the blue program here, this was the strong directionality program, was worn significantly longer for levels between 50 and 60 dB. For lower levels, the low directionality program was worn longer. And this actually means that people are behaving differently depending on the hearing program they have. And that also means that the situations they are experiencing with the different hearing programs are not comparable anymore. And it's not just this one study. I have seen similar things in several internal studies we did, that you have more speech and noise with a stronger beamformer, or that subjects reported a louder background with a stronger beamformer. And you probably all know that you cannot compare ratings if the situations rated are not comparable. But before thinking it through, I was not aware how horribly this can go wrong. Let's do a little thought experiment. Imagine we have two hearing aids. Both hearing aids are doing really well for speech and quiet. For speech and noise, the first hearing aid is doing okay, and the second one is doing really horribly. Then our subject tests hearing aid 1. During the week, he likes to watch TV, gives excellent ratings. On the weekend, he likes to party. In speech and noise, hearing aids are only okay, so he gives 3 stars. In the second week, he also starts watching TV, excellent ratings. Then on Friday night, he goes to a party, but the hearing aids are really crappy. So after half an hour, he finds an excuse to leave the party, goes home and watches TV. Unfortunately, there was no random trigger at the short time he spent at the party, but there are plenty of random triggers at the long night at home in front of the TV. And on Saturday, he was originally planning to go to the party, but skips the party because the hearing aids are so horrible, watches TV. And then comes the experimenter and compares the rating for the two hearing instruments. And we do have a clear winner. The hearing instrument 2 has much better rating, even though by definition, it was worse than hearing instrument 1. So this avoidance behavior can even change the rank order we obtain in such experiments. You might tell me that this is a very extreme example, and you are right. If they would really avoid the party, they would report it to us and we would surely know it. But there are many more subtle ways of modifying the situations. Maybe they don't leave after half an hour, but they just get tired half an hour earlier without even noticing that the hearing aids play a role in this. Maybe with one hearing aid, I need to lean forward to increase the SNR, while for the other one, I don't need it. Or maybe it's not even the hearing aid wearer who changes, but the conversation partner realizes that the hearing aid wearer has a problem understanding and starts speaking up or speaking more clearly. So there are a lot of ways how we modify our acoustic environment. And even if the effect is not strong enough to change the rank order, it could very well lead to an overestimation of the hearing aid performance and an underestimation of the difference between the two hearing programs. So what can we do about this problem? One possibility would be to use A/B tests. So subjects are much less likely to change the environment switching between program A and B. Still, you could lean more forward or something like that, but you have much fewer possibilities to modify your acoustic environment in an A/B test. It would probably interrupt your daily life more. In the middle of a conversation, it's easier to just remember, okay, the hearing instrument was performing great or not so great, than to actually switch back and forth and fill out the questionnaire for that. And it works well if you have two hearing programs which you want to compare, but if you actually want to compare two different devices, then it's very cumbersome. Another possibility would be to have carefully designed triggers for exemplary listening situations. You could base this on the acoustic data, or you could tell subjects to trigger only in a particular situation, and depending on how well you can define your triggers, this would make the situations more comparable, and that also works with different technologies and across different studies. And possibly there's also a third possibility that the wearing time in a certain environment could be used as a measure. This is a bit uncertain because generally the wearing time of hearing instruments is not really telling you much about the satisfaction with the hearing instrument. But I think if I wear one instrument longer in a situation than the other, this is telling us something about the hearing aid performance. So to sum up this part of the talk, aggregating over all situations often does not show any differences because subjects have opposing needs in different situations. So there is a need to focus on specific situations anyway. And situations with dissatisfactory hearing aid performance may be avoided. And that leads to the underestimation of differences between hearing aids, or could even change the rank order of the rating we obtain in our study. And possible countermeasures could be A/B tests, defining triggers for prototypical listening situations, or use the time spent in a condition as a measure for quality. Any questions on this?
I have 3 questions in the chat.
Okay.
Question number 1. Can you just remind us what EMA stands for?
Ecological Momentary Assessment.
Okay.
So basically answering questions in the moment, because imagine you have a fan running. This is something you usually just ignore. But if you're asked in that situation, you maybe pay attention to the background and you can report on it. However, if you asked me last week in that room, was there any background noise, I will probably say no. And ecological, because it's while people are living in their lives, in their usual environment, and assessment.
Okay. Next one. Can one change the frequency response of the hearing aid to reduce masking effects when intelligibility is preferable to accuracy or fidelity?
So the acoustician has lots of possibilities. They can change this. I'm not an acoustician, but you can change the frequency response. But then the hearing aid wearer usually has to live with our automatic program, or if that does not work well, has to go back to the acoustician.
Okay. The next one, a lot of communication is non-verbal. Are test subjects' visual acuity assessed as well? Many people with imperfect vision avoid wearing glasses.
So far, we haven't done that. I mean, it's of course correct that you are using visual cues more if you cannot hear well, and but so far we neither assessed visual acuity of the people, nor did we ask in EMA whether they can see the person they are trying to listening to. Something which might be an interesting question to include.
Okay.
But it presumably is closer to the ecological part, right? So you want to test how people with various levels of visual acuity deal with the situation that they're living with. That's kind of the point of the exercise, isn't it?
Yes. It's of many factors which play a role, and I think the difficulty with testing something in real life is that you have many different influence factors, and the vision you have is one, and you try to control the most important ones. You don't want to burden the subjects too much with too many questions, so you have to live with the fact that you cannot control everything. But if this is very important to you, of course, it makes sense to test for visual acuity as well, and to try to find out about the particular situation, whether someone was facing in the direction that they could lip read, for example, to help them. It's definitely an important question. We just have started somewhere else.
Yeah, it's sort of it's kind of scary, isn't it, to think about all the different options here. Kind of makes you want to not do it, I suppose, if you if you're staring down the barrel of all of these problems. But I think the point is, if you don't do this sort of study and you're stuck with lab studies, the thing is, what are you missing in the lab? And that's equally daunting. So it's just part
of more scary, actually.
Yeah, it's part of the.
I think it's good to have a combination of both, because EMA is messy, and it has less accuracy than a laboratory experiment. But within a laboratory experiment, usually you test just one very artificial situation, and then you're wondering how relevant is this really for real life. And I think you also have different possibilities in EMA to move it a little bit more towards laboratory and towards controlled by, for example, controlling for the objective data. And you can say, okay, I only take situations with a level between 65 and 75 dB, for example. It's not the same as a laboratory experiment, but it's more controlled than if you just have a pen and paper study. And I think we are just starting out, finding out all the difficulties of this method and all the beauty of this method.
Good. Anyone else has a question? Otherwise, we can crack on with the next part.
So the next part is, what situations are we missing? For example, if you're in the middle of a conversation, maybe you're not too keen in answering a questionnaire. So it could be that there are biases. And let me start with a question. What does it mean that EMA is representative for real life? One thing is that subjects are living their lives, and you ask them in a situation that matters to them, rather than in an artificial situation in the laboratory where they are doing something only because the study lead has asked them to do this. So these are situations they care about. And another thing you could understand is if you have random triggers, you would imagine that all situations are represented equally. And in particular, with evaluating hearing aids, social situations are important because they are very problematic, but at the same time very, very important for real life. And it might be that in social situations, our hearing aid wearers are not too keen on answering questionnaires, especially since many hearing aid wearers are elderly people and they have an even stronger feeling of smartphone usage being inappropriate in social situations. So we are wondering whether there's a selection bias in subjects' responses. Here you can see what responses we collected. So this is basically the data from the study I just presented. There were two questions. One was on the directionality and the other question was on the method, which situation do we cover? And we were not quite sure how many questions can we ask subjects. So we have the 4 to 7 most important questions. And we said, if you answer just those, that's fine. You can stop after that if you are busy and we are satisfied. However, if you have more time, there's an optional part and would be really nice if you answer the optional part as well. And as you can see here in the first diagram, most of the time subjects were answering the long questionnaire. We also had the different triggers, which presumably sample different situations. And you can see in the second diagram here that the distribution of the triggers varies from subject to subject. We also asked them at the end of the study, was the number of triggers okay, which they said it was. But they said it was annoying to carry the phone with them all the time. And they said the 3-week study period was too long. And whenever they missed a questionnaire, they had 15 minutes time to answer to that questionnaire when a notification came. And after these 15 minutes, we tried to ask in a nice way why they missed that questionnaire. And you can see here the most important reason why they missed it was that they said it's inappropriate to answer in this situation. Not hearing the alarm was also an important reason, so it might be a good idea to stream the signal for the questionnaire notification directly into the hearing instrument, but at the moment we're not doing this. And if they said it was inappropriate, then we also asked in what way was it inappropriate. And there the most common response was it would be impolite. The second most common response were safety reasons, for example, driving a car. And of course, we don't want our subjects to have an accident because they are filling out EMA questionnaires. And in addition to that, each evening they were supposed to fill out a questionnaire where we were asking about situations where we did not get subjective feedback. So we ask whether situations where you would have liked to trigger a questionnaire, but you didn't do it despite having something to tell us. They also had the possibility to configure times where there were no triggers. So we asked them, did you configure a do not disturb time? And in which situations were questionnaires particularly annoying. Technically, finding questionnaires annoying does not necessarily lead to fewer answers, but you're probably more likely to skip a questionnaire in annoying situations. And then we clustered the responses, and you can see that social situations for all 3 questions were the most common reason for not answering questionnaires. So social situations are missing, subjective data is missing in social situations. These were the responses of the subjects. We also looked at the data. Whenever there was a questionnaire, we looked at the 3 minutes before that questionnaire and looked how our classifier classified the situation. And we also looked at the complete wearing time collected by the EMA app, and you can see that for speech and noise situations, there were significantly fewer responses for the random trigger than you would expect from the complete wearing time. So speech and noise situations are underrepresented, quiet situations tend to be overrepresented, and car was also underrepresented. And you can see the same in the responses to the question, whom or what are you? And so there we compared the random trigger and the wearing time. You also see the remaining triggers, and you can see that for the loud environment trigger, for example, you have many more responses in speech and noise situations and in car situations. So you could use that to compensate a little bit for this. And you also see that when you look at the responses to the question, whom or what are you listening to? With a random trigger, we get a lot of TV or radio situations, while with a loud environment trigger, we get a lot of group conversations, for example. Then in the end of day questionnaire, we also asked for missing objective data. If the mobile phone, if people do not have the mobile phone with them, then of course we cannot record objective data. So we asked, in which situation did you have the mobile phone not with you or switched off? And again, there was a large part for social situations. There were also a couple of unspecific situations like forgetting the phone, but I'm not so worried about this because this should affect each situation equally and not target one specific situation. So also the objective data is also in the objective data, social situations are underrepresented. And again, you can also see that in the data, we looked at the data we got from the EMA app and also the data logging the hearing aids do over the whole time. And you can see that in the data from the EMA app, quiet is underrepresented and quiet is overrepresented and speech and noise is underrepresented. So it's the same picture, less data for speech and noise situations. And you can actually also look at long questionnaires and short questionnaires and questionnaires which are answered immediately and with some delay. And you see that the underrepresentation is stronger in long questionnaires than in short questionnaires. And it's stronger in questionnaires which are answered immediately than with those which are answered with some delay. And all these effects are accumulating. And if you are comparing the entire wearing time with high quality questionnaire responses, meaning random trigger responses which are answered immediately and where the full questionnaire is answered, you only get 1/3 of the situations you would actually expect from the wearing time. And if you add the loud environment trigger and the random trigger, then you can partially compensate for it, and then you get 2/3 of the responses you would actually expect. So to summarize, social situations are underrepresented in subjective as well as in objective data. There is less underrepresentation if questionnaires are very short or if subjects have the possibility to answer with some delay. But at least there is some information on social situations. It's not like they never respond in social situations. So if you want to use it for the communication between patient and acousticians, I guess it's fine. But if you want to evaluate hearing aids, then you have an underreporting of problems and less accuracy when you compare two technologies. Questions?
Nothing new in the chat so far.
Okay, then
so
I go.
Did you cover how long the questionnaires are? How many pages?
Up to 37 questions.
Wow. Okay. For the long one.
But they did not take more than 2 or 3 minutes. So there is some guideline for EMA questions, yet you should try to stick to 2 or 3 minutes, and at least the median was within that time span. And also subjects learn the questionnaire by heart. So quite often they reported that they are not filling it out directly in the situation, but remember the responses and they get faster. The more questionnaires they fill out, the faster they get because they are familiar with the questionnaire.
Mm-hmm. So I suppose it's understandable that people have an issue filling out the 2-minute survey, because if I'm evaluating something and I get an alert now, I'm going to have to tell you guys to hang on for 2 minutes while I finish this and then get back to you. So that's obviously not going to work. But yeah, okay. So and are you going to cover something like a much more simple one, like are you happy or not sort of thing? So I mean, it could just ask you, are you happy or not, I suppose, as a sort of continual thing, which is obviously a super simplified one, but it would be, you'd get more data by doing that, I suppose.
Yes, you definitely would get more data, and it's not so difficult to answer one question in social situations. So I guess if it's very important that social situations are included, I mean, there's a trade-off. Either you ask only one quick question, or you tell them answer later. And what we were trying to do is, because for us it was very important to get the objective data as well, we asked them, please start the questionnaire, because we get some additional objective data as soon as the questionnaire is started. Finish your conversation and then fill out the questionnaire directly after the conversation, because then we have the objective data. But it did not go particularly well. And I don't think it is that subjects are not able to do it. I just think it was the first EMA study they participated in, and it was very complicated and a lot of things to remember. And I think in the first lab appointment, they simply did not get it. So that's one of the questions I'm worrying on. How can you make sure that you get the objective data of exactly that situation they are evaluating? And maybe it's also a possibility that you just press a lever on the hearing instrument to say, okay, this is the situation I'm evaluating. And then you go on with your life, and when you have time, when you finished your conversation, maybe you can report then. Of course, there's a little bit there could be a little bit of memory bias, or you could have changed somehow. But I think it's still the best thing you can do. You cannot, I mean, there are situations where you simply cannot expect subjects to fill out a questionnaire.
Yes, now you're closer than you would be in another sort of paper and pen situation, presumably. But I'm just wondering about making it much more simple and therefore getting more data but less detailed data. But yeah, I think that's one of the options, I guess. But,
that's definitely one way to go. But on the other hand, even with the 37 questions, people were not complaining that the questionnaire was too long. They were only complaining that the study period was too long. They were annoyed by having to carry the phone all the time, and they said the 3 weeks were too long. But we specifically asked them, were there too many questions, and they did not complain about that.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Does it mean that the situation where using the hearing aid well is the most critical? It's a social situation, right? And then probably people that are not very comfortable about their hearing loss feel even more uncomfortable with having to fill out a questionnaire, right? So you get a reinforcement on the problem. Yeah.
I think it also has to do with the cognitive load. One question we also had was, how stressed are you? Mm-hmm. And you could see that I mean, in the situation where the directionality was supposed to help, subjects were more stressed, and we were wondering, how can this be? And I believe what this actually means is, if they have more help from the hearing instrument, they also fill out the questionnaire even when they are stressed. And if they don't have the support from that hearing program, they don't fill out the questionnaire because they are stressed. So it's difficult to look at what is really an outcome variable and what is actually a predictor, at least with this kind of question. And it can be that, it depends on the cognitive resources, whether people will fill out a questionnaire or not.
Thanks. So I guess we can go to the next.
Okay. So there we have a study where we analyzed the hearing program usage. So you have a universal program inside the hearing instrument. So there you have automatic steering of the signal processing, which depends on the situation. But usually you have a very slow fading between the different algorithms and only subtle adaptation of the gain, because you don't want the subject to have an interrupt change. And on the other hand, you can configure different hearing programs, which are manually selectable, and there the hearing aid wearer would expect an immediate change and a perceptible change of amplification and signal processing. And these programs need to be configured by the acoustician. However, we see that many patients only have one program, or if they have several, they only use one program. So we wanted to know how do they interact with different programs, and is it just too complicated to choose between those special programs, or are they too lazy to switch and just happy with the universal, or maybe it's just the acoustician who does not configure the program. So we did a study with 10 subjects where we sent them home again for 3 weeks, and we gave them 6 different programs and told them to try out all of these 6 programs within the 3 weeks. And the EMA app also worked as a remote control. They could use it to switch the hearing programs. And once a day, the app would automatically change into a random program, because we also wanted to know how long would they use which program, and maybe they just stick to whatever program they start with and never change. So we did an automatic change to a random program, seeing would they switch back immediately, or would they just stick in that program. And we asked them whenever they change the program, they should fill out a self-triggered questionnaire. And these are the programs we gave them. It was the universal program. And we told them that it's suitable for all situations. A noisy environment program, which would amplify the target speaker in the front and could help in loud environments. A TV program, a louder and a softer program, and a traditional program which had less signal processing and a more stable impression. And here you can see which programs they used. And you can see that the universal program was used twice as often than any other program. However, the other programs were all used as well. So there was no program which has not been used. And subjects changed between 1 and 7 times per day. The average was 3 program changes per day. And when they switched program, we asked them how the hearing situation changed, whether it was an improvement or whether it was a deterioration. And you can see that for the universal program, almost always they reported that it was either no change or an improvement. There never was a deterioration. So this is showing that we're doing something right with the universal program, and it's for no situation really bad. But also for the special programs, there were some situations where it was deteriorating, but most of the time it was improving, or there was no change. So showing subjects were able to use those programs and to choose it for situations where it does make sense. We also wanted to know the reason for changing a program. And you can see this dark blue here shows for change of a hearing situation. This was the most common reason, that they said the situation changed, so they changed program. We also asked whether they might do it and in anticipation of a situation. This was rarely the case, just to test it out, or because they are dissatisfied with the current setting. So this was also quite often the case, especially for the softer program. And we also asked them what was the purpose, what did they want to achieve with changing the program. And this indeed changes from program to program. So for the loud environment program, for example, they used it to reduce loud and disturbing noises. And in equally the softer program, they used for reducing loud and disturbing noises. However, when you look in which acoustic environments they are using these programs, then you don't find so much differences. So what you see here is the histogram of the different situations determined by our classifier. And this gray dots with error bars, it's the mean level for the situations in that program. And there is a difference for the loud environment program. This is indeed used more in louder situations. You have less quiet. But if you look at the remaining programs, there's actually not so much of a difference between the programs, especially the louder and the softer program. The environments look nearly identical. So this surprised us. And so we looked a bit deeper into the data. And here you see one day of one subject in this experiment. You can see in the morning there was an automatic program change from the universal program to softer, And obviously the subject did not like the softer program in that situation and immediately changed to the traditional. However, then he or she sticks to the traditional program for quite a long time, from 9 o'clock in the morning until nearly 6 o'clock in the evening. And here you see the different levels he encountered in that time, and you see the different classes. In the morning, there was a lot of speech and quiet, then some quiet, then some noise, quiet again, speech and quiet. And then in the evening, there was some speech and noise. And only in the evening after the speech and noise, there was finally a change to the softer program. And you would imagine, because subjects said they change programs whenever the situation changes, that he changes directly when the speech and noise starts. But if you look closely, it's about a quarter of an hour later after the speech and noise actually started. And sometimes hearing impaired report that they only recognize the change of the situation from the reaction of the environment, of the conversation partners, for example. It takes some time to find out if you're misunderstanding a lot. And maybe they are just reacting with some delay. And this could also explain why we are not able to say why we don't see different environments for the different programs. So to conclude, the universal program was used most often and never unsuitable. So it's a good advice if you don't know which program to use the universal program. One question which is still open, we told them that this is a universal program and we told them that it's suitable for all situations. So we're not really sure whether this is really because of the sound quality or whether there's also a name bias. So we would like to do an extension of the study where we actually change the names and see if we get the same results. We also saw that the special programs were also used and considered useful in many cases. But we saw that the objective and the subjective data does not always fit regarding the reason and the purpose for the program. And one reason could be a different or delayed subjective perception of the situation, or it could be that the subject simply perceives the environment differently than our classifier says. Questions?
There is nothing new in.
Was the classifier verified?
We of course internally did a lot of studies where we verified the classifier, but of course no classifier is 100% correct. I mean, for example, if you listen to heavy metal music, it would say it's noise and not music, and I guess some subjects would agree and others maybe not. Yeah, so it's not perfect,
no.
But I think the.
Yeah, it is interesting though, isn't it? I think perhaps it also it's fascinating. You can see when they switch and the objective data along with it, and so it seems maybe that they would switch when it becomes noticeably bad. So up until that point, everything is like always like a threshold of annoyance or something where they would switch then when it isn't obviously bad, but maybe a continual assessment or to have them switch it, I guess. I mean, one could do that potentially as well, right? To sort of like enforce a switch regularly.
I mean, that's what we did as well. And I mean, you see there was a switch and force. We switched from universal to soft. And the subject immediately reacted. I mean, you can hear a beep in the hearing instrument whenever the program is changed. So maybe they were alarmed to it from the beep and then could see on the EMA app which program it was. So quite often we saw an immediate reaction to that. But then it seems that they just stick to one program for a very long time. So I think as long as it is good enough, they just stick to it because it's effort to change to a different program.
Yes, but you would, I suppose, maybe link I'm just thinking, link the objective data change to then a question for them to switch it and switch it out or switch it off effectively and say, now select a new a program, I guess. And is that what these data points are along the traditional line there? So at example,
so every dot you see
10.
here is some interaction with the app. So I think that at these points, the subject was looking at the app but not changing the program. And here he just toggled through the different programs.
Yes, yeah. It's all. I'm just thinking maybe almost like a bit like that, like an enforced toggle through the programs to work out which one's better, and do that, like ask them to do that regularly, or perhaps when the app notices an objective change. It's just something going through my head. I don't know. As an option to enforce them to say if which one they prefer for that particular juncture, because right now you're seeing that they will like or that none of these is becoming so bad that they want to change it effectively, which is still good data, but it might be also interesting to have that other thing.
The goal of the study was not to find out which program is best in which environment, but it was to find out would they use different programs. And they reported back that they liked having different programs, even the ones which on their own hearing instruments did not have several programs and did not have the possibility to use an app as a remote control. They liked doing it, but then they are not switching whenever the environment changes. And I mean, of course, you can force them to find out which program works best for them in a certain situation. But if in real life they wouldn't switch to that program anyway, then either
That's
you have
true.
to.
Yes. But you would be answering that question in the real life situation. So yeah, it depends what you want to ask for, obviously.
Yeah.
And to that, there is a comment in the chat. The data would seem to indicate that perhaps 3 physical buttons on the hearing aid itself could be useful, and then the person could use the app to assign each button one of the modes, and then they make the switch by pressing the button instead of going into the app.
There is a control of the program on the hearing aid. So you have a rocker switch on the hearing aid, and then you can toggle through. It would always go. I mean, usually when you switch on a hearing aid, it always starts in the first program. Not in this study, but in a normal hearing instrument, it starts in the first program, and then you can go from the first to the second to the third and so on, or the other way around from the first to the sixth. Well, if you have 6 programs, that's the most that you can have. So you have a switch on the hearing instrument where you can change it. And it depends, I guess, on the dexterity and how used you are, whether it's easier to fiddle around behind your ear or to use the app.
The next one, what are the main causes of hearing loss? Is it accidental, age, heredity, other?
Well, I would think that age is the most common reason. Of course, if you have been subjected to loud noise, then it's more common. But the most hearing loss we see is due to old age. And unfortunately, today there are people are more aware that they have to protect their hearing in loud noises. So there is not so much trauma from loud noises anymore. But of course, it could also be some illnesses. So if you have very young people who have a hearing loss, there are very few people compared to the old age hearing loss. But if you have a Mittelohrentzündung,
middle ear infection.
Yeah.
The next one, can I go over to the next one? Do you also gather data on the subject's interests, personalities, and age? Every person is different, which would skew the data from person to person.
That's an excellent question. And when I started out, I asked them lots of questions on their personality and age. And we also had them do some working memory tests in the laboratory. But the problem is that we only had 20 subjects. And also our database, it's not terribly large and it's a lot of work. And if you just have 20 subjects, then it's very hard to find any correlations. So you would need to do some large-scale studies, but it would be very interesting to do a large-scale study to see what predicts what subjects actually need based on their personality or working memory and things like that, cognitive abilities.
The next one is, what is the meaning of the wide gap from 18 to 1815 on the plot? Was the hearing aid switched off during this time?
Either it was switched off or we just didn't get the data. There is no data, and I cannot say whether the hearing aid was switched off. I would rather think that maybe the hearing aids were not in the vicinity of the app and we just were not able to collect the data.
Okay, that was the last one.
Okay, cool. So the last thing I wanted to talk about were contactless studies. So for these studies, we only wanted to have experienced hearing aid users because telling them over a video call how to insert the hearing aids, it's maybe a little bit difficult. And of course, also only people who are comfortable with mobile phones. And the thing is, you have to adjust the hearing aids to the hearing ability of the subject. And you can do what we call a first fit. So you have the audiogram, the hearing loss, and then our software predicts what would be the best amplification for that. But usually subjects also need some fine tuning and you fiddle around with the settings until the subject is satisfied. And we have a software which helps us with that. So what we did was we sent them a parcel with hearing aids, with batteries, also with different receivers. So that's basically the wire extending from the hearing aid to the part which goes into subject's ears. And depending on the size of the ear, you might need a different one. And also you might need a different size of domes, the part that goes into your ear. We send them a mobile phone and some instructions. We prepared it in a way that all the apps were pre-installed and the hearing aids were coupled. And then you can use this Signia app software together with Telecare to do a video call. So that you can talk to the subjects. You can also see whether the hearing instrument is inserted correctly. And then you can make a connection to the hearing instruments. And basically, you can do all the changes which an acoustician usually would do in the shop when the person is there. You can do that remotely. So you can do EMA studies also completely contactless by just mailing everything to them and then doing the adjustment via this software. And we did, I think by now we did 3 studies in this way. And at the beginning, subjects were a little bit intimidated by all this equipment, but it worked out really well. And in the phone call first, usually I called them first, told them to open this app because many of our subjects are not the most tech savvy. Then called them on this video conference software, did the fine tuning. And then we did a couple of EMA questionnaires to make sure that they are used to the EMA, using the EMA. Then they did their home trial. We collected data for a couple of weeks. And the nice thing is that the data is immediately uploaded to the cloud. So we can already start evaluating it, and more importantly, we can check on the subjects in between, and we would see if no responses are coming, then maybe you call them and ask, hey, do you have any problems? And then in the end, there was an exit interview via phone, and then they sent back the hearing aids. And especially in these times when it's more and more difficult to do studies in the lab, it's nice if you have a possibility to collect data completely contactless. And this basically summarizes my whole talk. We have seen that EMA is a method which can be used to analyze hearing problems and the benefit of hearing solutions in real life. It can help to compare the benefit of hearing aid settings by the means of subjective ratings, and you could also look at the time spent in certain acoustic environments, so that you could even get subconscious feedback. And we have seen that EMA may underestimate differences between different hearing programs because some situations might be avoided, and this avoidance behavior can be different for different hearing programs. There, an A/B comparison might help or focus on specific situations. And the other problem is that subjects may not want to respond to questionnaires in social situations. So there it helps to have either just one question, like Raphael suggested, or to giving them the possibility to report shortly afterwards. You cannot only use EMA for evaluating technologies, but also to see how subjects interact with your technology. So we have seen that hearing aid wearers often remain in one program for a long time, basically as long as it is good enough. But they are also happy to have additional programs, and that the acoustic environment cannot really predict which program they will choose. And we have seen that EMA is also a method which could be used to do contactless research when you cannot invite subjects to the laboratory. And with that, I would like to thank my collaborators, Anne-Elisabeth Krug from the Meisterschule in Lübeck and Jana Welling and Rosalinde Fischer, who worked on the program switching study. Patricia Kunz and Anja Zutz did the program comparison and the missing situation study. And Bastian Buder from the Developers GmbH is our programmer who programmed this great app. And I would like to thank you for your attention. Any final questions?
Yeah, by now I think if you have a question, you can just unmute yourself and ask it. Probably be the easiest.
Or if you're shy, you can text us and we'll still. Me and Elena like talking, so that's fine. Can do that for you.
Thank you very much for the fascinating presentation. I've learned a lot. It's a really difficult topic that you're dealing with.
Yeah, real life is messy and difficult, but it's also fascinating.
Yeah. I think I speak for everyone when I say this has been really fascinating. It's a completely different new topic. I've thought about how one could do these sort of things in my fields as well, and it's just been nice to hear, you know, just your summary of all of the challenges and what you've been doing, how you've been coping with the COVID situation as well. That seems like that's something which has been or could be successful in this way. Also, the remote tuning must also be kind of fascinating as well. You hear about these remote operations, you know, the surgeon somewhere with the remote controls, and then the operation happening somewhere else. It's a kind of similar thing, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, by now we also have a lot of opportunities to change the design while subjects are out there. I mean, we started out with a simple APK, so it needed to be tested really well before you send the subject out, because you cannot change anything anymore. And nowadays we upload it to the Play Store. We can assign the questionnaire while subjects are out. And if we decide to change it in the middle of the study, because maybe there are two parts, we can change it in the middle of the study. We can change the number of triggers people get, or whether they get triggers based on the loudness or random triggers or whatever. So it's by now a really flexible tool, and in this pandemic, it's really great that you can change a lot without the subjects coming back into the laboratory.
Yeah.
There is a question in the chat. Really interesting presentation. Thank you very much. With remote selection, would it be helpful if users could have their own favorites, which they could name for themselves, like gym, church, supermarket?
Definitely. And I mean, in normal life, they can go to their acoustician, and the acoustician could configure a program for exactly the situation where you are having problems. If, for example, whenever you're at breakfast, the noise from the plates is annoying you, then you could configure a breakfast program with some noise cancellation. And well, I mean, if you just have the hearing instrument, it does not tell any name of it, but you could communicate to the patient, use this when at breakfast or whatever. And in the EMA app, we are able to name the program whatever we want. So we were first debating whether we should try to have 6 individual programs for each person, depending on what they like. But we thought it's too complicated, and then it's also hard to compare it. So we decided to have 6 programs, which we hope would be useful for the majority of people. I guess, Raphael, for automotive, I could imagine that it's difficult to use this, because while people are driving, they shouldn't be filling out questionnaires. Maybe if you have text to speech to text.
Yeah, there's various ways one could do this, and sort of evaluation of the sound system, for example, by the people as they're driving around, and or perhaps just you can do these sort of things also by not necessarily asking the people. So you could have them drive the car and listen to the sound system, and you could just monitor how they set up the sound system, if they ever change it or how they set it up, and so on. So there's various ways of looking at this also, without necessarily just observing the subject rather than asking them as well. But one can, I mean, in a test vehicle, or even presumably in a app-based infotainment system, one could still ask questions and get a sort of feedback via the touch screen or something at various points, I suppose. It could just be like one of your interrupts, and then you wait till you're parked up or whatever until you answer. If are you happy ? And you press thumbs up or thumbs down. I don't know.
Well, I guess if it's only one question, you probably could do it even while you are driving. Even so, I'm not sure I would want to instruct subjects to do that.
No, but there's possibilities, and but the even more fascinating is the control of the system and that sort of thing. Like just viewing how people do it. And but
do
then
you have
perhaps
something like a motion recognition software, for example? I mean, you could also get feedback from that.
One has anything one needs these days in the cars. You can see whether people are falling asleep as well. There's just the possibilities are endless. It's just obviously with a production car, you're not going to assume that one could build that sort of thing in on top, but there are smartphone integrations, for example, in the cars, where you get the actual what the screen would be on the phone up on the display. One could perhaps work with that, or just have an extra thing built in. I don't know, but relatively easy to have some kind of additional data logger or something. But anyway, so that's
okay, we're very good on time. We have 1 minute left.
Okay, perfect.
I'd like
Has anyone else got a burning question? They can throw it in they can unmute themselves and throw it in the chat. Otherwise, the one thing, sorry, Elena, one thing is just write some comments in the chat. Nadja's not been able to look at the chat yet, so if you wanted to just thank her or whatever, then feel free to do that as well. That's some people are doing that already. So Nadja can check the comments in the chat later once we've finished the presentation. But thanks. Sorry, Elena.
One thing I just like to tell everybody that our next colloquium will be in 2 weeks. On the 2nd of February, it will be a master thesis presentation of Lukas Benedicic, and it will be about audio production in the context of stereo upmix capable playback systems. There will be information about it on the website, so we really hope to see you all there. And thank you very much, everybody, for being here, for all your questions, and of course to Nadja for the wonderful presentation.